Welcome back once again to another, aka the first public installment of Phil versus the Cup. Phil, how you doing today? Welcome back to your show, the show in which you're the only contestant. How are you today, Phil West?
Well, I am in the second day of a work conference and just wrapped up my day. And I am now at a Hyatt Place behind a Whataburger and a Walmart in
Well,
beautiful San Antonio. So that
speaking
is
of
that is how I am doing.
Phil, after this week's Open Cup match, I accosted you in the press conference room to kill time by asking you some weird, obscure, off kilter Open Cup trivia. I have the remaining, we'll say the leftover questions from that battery of significant knowledge that I was testing you on. Phil, do you feel ready to meet the challenge of the oldest domestic cup competition in the United States?
No, I wasn't ready when you did this to me right before the post-match press conference on Wednesday after we had a emotional journey watching that game. So I am just as not ready as I was back then. So
Well,
hit me
Phil,
with some questions.
let's do a couple of things just as maybe warm up, things that the not viewing, listening audience were not present for. Phil, what law firm sounding club won the U.S. Open Cup three times? Was it Sticks, Bear, and Fuller, Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, or Lorenz and Lorenz?
Oh, it's Six Baron Fuller, which
There we go.
we talked about. Yeah, that's great. That's
Very good.
good.
Yeah, they last won the final back in the 1930s. Now, here's the crazy thing. The other two teams that have won the Open Cup three times, which is one time more than Austin FC captain Ilya Sanchez,
Mhm.
both of them are still actual clubs. One of them is an MLS club. The other plays off in the East Coast in a league whose name I would have to look up. Do you remember the name of those two clubs, Phil?
Was the club still in existence in the obscure league? Was that Brooklyn
Nope. Nope, not
Italian?
Brooklyn. Not Brooklyn, but close, Phil. You're within the boroughs, but this one is more Astorian in nature. They currently play in the
Okay.
Eastern Premier Soccer League.
It's a Queens something.
Nope, nope, Phil. We were looking for the New York Pancyprian Freedoms, who currently play in the Eastern Premier Soccer League. Now, do you recall which is the MLS side that has won
I
it three times?
believe it is the currently winless LA Galaxy.
Unfortunately, Phil, we were looking for DC United. DC
Oh,
United.
I thought they won
DC.
more than three. Okay. Yeah.
They've won exactly three, most recently in 2013. Now, jumping back to the ones who have won it twice,
That's right.
three MLS sides and two currently defunct sides from the boroughs of New York. Can you name all five clubs that have won the Open Cup twice? You can start with the defunct ones. You can start with the MLS ones. Any order, it's up to you.
Okay. Chicago Fire and Houston Dynamo.
Now, Chicago Fire have won it twice, but they've
Oh,
won it more than twice.
that's right.
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
mm-hmm,
But I
mm-hmm.
know the Dynamo was one.
The Dynamo has won.
And SKC has won it more than twice.
Correct. They have also won it four times.
Let's see. And LAFC's only won it once.
Correct.
Seattle Sounders?
Seattle Sounders have also won it twice, but they've won it a total of four times.
Oh,
You know
goodness.
all of the
Okay.
four timers. Staying a little closer to the Houston Dynamo geographically,
FC Dallas.
FC Dallas, correct.
Right.
There's only one other MLS side that has won it exactly two times. You may have already mentioned them, not in the context of this answer.
Ilya Sanchez.
Ilya Sanchez, correct, but Ilya Sanchez still not a club. MLS legend for sure, but not yet a registered club. Somewhere West Coasterly is where you're aiming, Phil. Not
Oh, San Jose
exactly.
Earthquakes.
Nope, nope, nope.
Uh,
You were close with LAFC.
okay. LA Galaxy. No, but
Yes,
wait.
LA
Okay.
Galaxy.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the three MLS clubs, Houston Dynamo, LA Galaxy, FC Dallas, and then the pair of defunct New York area clubs that have won it twice. Do you remember?
Okay. Brooklyn Italians.
Brooklyn Italians is correct.
And you said the other one was also a New York club?
It is also Brooklyn, too.
Oh. Oh, was it Brooklyn Americans?
It was Brooklyn Hispano.
Oh, that's right.
from the era of the 1940s, in which people's racial extraction was how we occasionally name soccer clubs. So, Phil, of the clubs that have won it 4 times, you've already named most of them. You've named Sporting Kansas City, the Seattle Sounders, and the Chicago Fire. There are 3 other clubs that have won the Open Cup 4 times. They are all defunct. One back in the 1930s, the other 2 in the mid to late 1960s. And I would be amazed if you picked any of them.
Well, I said Bethlehem Steel, but that was like a 5-time winner.
Right. That's a 5-time winner right alongside what Los Angeles area club that is also defunct?
Maccabee Los Angeles.
Maccabee Los Angeles. That's correct, Phil.
Okay.
You know what? I'm gonna end your suffering early.
Good.
The other 4-time winner clubs: Greek American AA, the Philadelphia Tridents, and Fall River FC.
You're making stuff up.
I'm not. These are all real. Fall River FC has not competed since 1931. The Philadelphia Tridents, 1966. And Greek American AA, 1967. They had a Greek general manager, a Greek coach. They played in the Eastern Premier Soccer League, like the New York Pansaprians, which I'm probably mispronouncing. But this has been everyone's installment of U.S. Open Cup stuff that I found myself looking up while dreading what was going to happen about 60 minutes into the match this past Wednesday.
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, oh yeah, shut up, oh yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies, including my shower did not have hot water this morning. So I am having quite the emotional journey on this work trip. Just Austin FC had an emotional journey on Wednesday night, coming 20 minutes from complete disaster and almost losing their round of 32 Open Cup match against El Paso Locomotive. You were there alongside with me. Tell me about your emotional journey during that game.
It was one of those things where a number of times last season and the season before, I was going, well, what exactly am I going to be expected to actually be able to get out of these players in the locker room? Who's going to want to talk and about what? And pondering my own fate, pondering my life choices. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? Why have I been doing this? What do I do from here? Which I gather was probably going through the minds of a lot of those players too. As Ilie Sanchez told me after the match, it was a difficult game to play, a difficult game to coach, a difficult game to cover, and a difficult game for the supporters to come out and support. And despite it all, we were all out there. And as we have been saying, and as I have been, I think, a little bit unpopular saying, it's just been a matter of when that goal comes to crack the dam and then the dam bursting open. And I feel validated for having accurately predicted that, boy, these boys just need some momentum. They need something to actually catch fire, and we'll see if they can make it a trend. But I think most of the credit goes to you, Phil, not the players, not the coaching, but you, Phil West, who I will say really tipped the game narrative in the direction of something we actually wanted to talk about by when it was tied 2-2, saying, I just want to go home. I have a lot of driving to do. I do not need extra time out of this match.
I'm not a fan of extra time.
And Phil, what did the players do? They responded to your exhortation to the heavens, and they gave you that third point that made it so that you could just friggin' go home.
Right.
Yeah, it was a roller coaster to be sure. It was the kind of thing where I enjoyed hearing Cam Kubak from the comms department, head of the comms department, rather, got to give him his proper titling, exclaiming how glad he was to do this kind of a rewrite. The amount of relief was palpable, where, as we discussed in the previous episode, supporting and believing in and wanting to see the team win is a different calculus for us in what we do, in the way that we do it. And man, I'm just glad that we have something interesting to talk about rather than rewriting funeral dirges.
Yeah. And the other thing that I kind of said to help propel the team to victory in the press box when it was 2-0 and it was about minute, I think 67 or 68. I believe you asked me, what do we think the latest is that Austin score to mount a comeback, and I said probably around minute 75. I felt like if they didn't score by then that they were going to be done, and lo and behold, shortly before minute 75 they started scoring goals. So yeah, and yeah, props to Ilya for saying that it was a tough game to cover, because not only does he include everybody, and again we're gonna talk more about him and his sage calm, as I called it in the post-match write-up on Thursday morning. He's just a delight to be around. I feel an inner peace when I am near him. And for him to talk about it being tough to cover, because it was tough to cover. Yes, I also did some rewriting. I was going from, oh boy, this isn't going to sit well. I know there's going to be a lot of very negative fan energy greeting this story and greeting the situation, to, wow, we've just witnessed a pretty remarkable comeback. Let's not have this be overblown, because again, this is a USL Championship side that they should have beaten handily, and instead they struggled to come back from 2 goals down. It was a great comeback, but a great comeback really shouldn't have been necessary in this game. And some questions still persist. Yes, they did get Azuni and Vasquez out on the field. They did both score. I think that was probably Nico Steves's intention by putting them both in the starting lineup, but it sure looked for a while like they weren't going to, and I'm still very concerned about their G minus XG totals, and I didn't see a whole lot in this game that made me necessarily think that maybe they're going to be now scoring goals willy-nilly, because I still see some issues. Again, Owen Wolf, I think, is the closest thing this team has to a 10, and we saw him at his most 10-like on Wednesday night, and that was very encouraging. Obviously, the 2 assists to Vasquez, exactly the kind of thing that we need to see out of Wolf and out of Vasquez. But and is the class, and starting with a really stern test on Saturday against FC Cincinnati. But let's talk a little bit more first about just this game. El Paso, the very creative jerseys that they were wearing. Beto Avila, for a while, being the best Austin player on the field, and being a Austin player who was once with the Austin Bold, not with Austin FC in any real capacity whatsoever. So that was a little alarming, but here we are. We are going off to a round of 16 match hosting the Houston Dynamo.
A few things to pick out. You mentioned dreading the fan reaction when it was still 2-0 for as long as it was. We got some of that fan reaction when the halftime whistle blew, in a way that was not really expected, that people have not been accustomed to hearing, not even not often, but just not hearing if it isn't being directed at the refs at Q2.
It was not directed at the refs.
It was not directed at the refs. It was very clearly directed at the players, at the play on the field, at the, we showed up on a Wednesday night and this is what you do. You play like this against a USL Championship side that you should be handily showing their own ass. And despite the fact that El Paso has been in pretty solid form of late and has been really connecting really well, you can have a technically on paper superior side that will fall to a lesser team that is playing better together. And to me, the story of this match, I agree with you. It should not have been as close as it was. It should not have been as steep of a hill to climb. What this team has needed has frankly been meat for the grinder, in the character of a club that really is a level beneath them, definitely a level beneath them, should be a level beneath them, that in open play, they are being challenged in a competitive match, not in a preseason match, not in a closed-door friendly, but in which their reputations are on the line. Maybe this is entirely hypothetical. It is not in any way based on any inside information or anything that I've seen. Maybe Mirto and Brandon don't like each other that much, on top of technically being in competition for one another, with one another, as to who's going to be scoring the goals. Maybe that's the case. They have to get past that, or neither one of them is making their millions. Both of them tank their value by not finding a way to work together. And what we saw in that 3-goal series is we saw them working together. We saw them either getting out of each other's way or making way for one another in the way that the goals actually come, in the way that Nico has assured us has happened in practice, has assured us has been possible. And we actually got to see that. And I think for them to actually work that out, it took them just having more minutes on the pitch where they're being held to account by the fans, held to account by the media, held to account by everyone watching in the league and outside of the league. That is something that they actually have to be accountable for, not just something that looks great in practice.
Right. And the goal that made me worried about extra time that equalized the match was Vasquez chesting down a pass and teeing Ozuni up for his goal. And so, yeah, we saw them working together in the best way possible to work together. The thing that we anticipated when they got signed, and again, you had brought this back up, I was a little concerned about Ozuni on this team when there was first the rumors going around that he was here, because Austin had just already kind of gotten a forward. And even though Ozuni has played some left wing, that he was also playing as a striker and seemed more striker-like than left wing-like from what we were seeing on tape. And again, I don't know that we've seen a whole lot this season with him playing that has really discredited that theory, that yes, he can be put out at left wing and nominally do some left wing things, but he is much more a striker or a second striker. And the 4-4-2 was not necessarily working. So they need to figure out ways to get them to play together. And again, I guess we saw that begin to come to a little bit of fruition against El Paso. But again, I don't know. Also, I'm a little bit worried about, okay, you've done this here, but can you do this against really good MLS defenses or even run-of-the-mill MLS defenses?
I think that one of the things that intrigues me about this possibility is something that we saw in the 2022 season, is that they had various little tricks up their sleeve. And then those tricks stopped working when everybody figured out how those tricks were working.
Yep.
And there wasn't really a backup plan. In this case, what I like about it in theory is that it puts two giant bullseyes on both Ozuni and Vasquez when they are both nominally playing the dual striker role. If they shift Ozuni in and out from playing left wing to playing centrally, and they are constantly confusing where the opposing side is needing to cover. They started the game with Diego Rubio and Brandon and Mirto all on the field at the same time. Screw it, three strikers. And in terms of looking at it as a distraction chaff for throwing off where they should be guarding whom, I think that it obviously didn't work that well in the first half. And if anything, letting it not work well ended up helping it work well for the balance of this particular match. But this is just looking at it in isolation as this match. I don't think that's a long-term strategy. I don't think tactically that going, we're going to do this every time, we're going to act like Mirto is not going to play centrally. But I think that flexing him in and out of those roles and looking at the flexibility of players like Robert Taylor when he's back from his minor injury, looking at that kind of flexibility around more single purpose pieces like Brandon Vasquez is something that is going to help them continue to frustrate defenses by putting them off of their footing. That's the only way that, to me, this roster build works, is continually making those kinds of shifts and doing things that look unconventional or look incredibly foolhardy just to get the opposing side into a rhythm of defending a certain way so that then they can break through from another direction by flipping the script a bit. That's what it feels like is going on and the direction that they want to go with this.
Right. And part of Rubio on the field, yeah, I mean, it did look like a 4-2-4 initially, which was really strange. From post-match press conference, from what Nico was saying about Rubio, was that he was kind of functionally a 10 who was cheating up at points, but also he was one of two halftime players who were pulled, or two players that were pulled at halftime because of a lack of effectiveness. And Nico talked about not wanting to necessarily hurt their feelings, but also needing to do something different. And that game did need Robert Taylor. And again, it was unfortunate that he did eventually suffer that injury. We saw him limping a little in the locker room after the game. Nico let us know that it seems to be like a hamstring sprain, something along those lines. We will likely not see him for maybe, I would guess, maybe the next week. But again, we'll have to see. But I would not count on him playing in Cincinnati, which may be okay. Because again, one of the things that we asked about at the end of the press conference too was, okay, now is Austin going to emphasize their Wednesday matches? Because again, they've got Atlanta who I think right now is a more beatable team than Cincinnati or Vancouver, which is their next two Saturday matches. And then they have an Open Cup game on the 21st against Houston. And then they have the RSL game, which those seem like those are more winnable games, and a couple of wins in May, which is what I thought they might do. And also you're going on to the quarterfinals of the Open Cup at that point. And so Nico seemed to say, though, that he's going to try to work everybody in as much as possible, testing the limits of human performance. There's going to have to be some sort of rotation. And I think the smart play would be to emphasize Wednesday, maybe let some players that would not normally get some starts in some of those Saturday games. Those could be real bad losses. But again, if you see those kind of lineups on those Saturday matches, you'll have to temper your expectations based on those. I know that there was a lot of consternation about the first 70 minutes of that game. And I think that this maybe bought Nico a little bit of a reprieve from fan anger getting this win. But again, and I don't think that if they get destroyed by Cincinnati on Saturday, that's necessarily going to reflect bad or turn the fan base. But if they summarily lose to Atlanta that next Wednesday, I think that we are maybe back into that conversation that we thought we were going to have at the end of this past Wednesday.
Yeah, Atlanta's in pretty uniquely bad form. We'll charge ahead to Cincinnati here in just a bit, but looking ahead to some of the future mayhem of May, as you allude to.
Mayhem.
Before we left Q2, we didn't know whether the next Open Cup match was going to be against Phoenix Rising or Houston Dynamo. Mm-hmm. And even though on paper, you might think going away to Phoenix may have been less of a challenge, that's also a long plane ride. That's playing away, having to bounce out of town and then bounce back into town, leaving for an away match, and then leaving again a few days later for an away match against Minnesota. Yep. So it would have been a bit rougher than to come home, be at home, even though the opponent is Houston, and even though what happened at Houston most recently. I think for the narrative, the big thing that will help the players and the coaching staff dig themselves out of a bit of a reputational hole with the fan base is summarily beat Houston at home. Yep. Summarily beat them at home. That is table stakes. That is basic expectations. It's not, it would be nice if. They absolutely must. In the same way that going in, I said they absolutely must win against El Paso.
Right. And Verdi against the Dynamo in Austin is a lot different than Verdi against the Dynamo in Houston.
Very much. Partly because of that horrible climate in Houston where you got swamp butt before you get off the bus. It is a different kind of a thing. It is a different thing than heat when you pack the heat with the humidity, or even not as much heat with the humidity, especially with European players. That really hits them like a wall of bricks in the way that we saw at the Qatar World Cup. The other piece of the Austin-Houston thing is that I think these players that had previously played for Josh, there is definitely a part of what went into the previous match that was Josh Wolf defeating his own players, as he had many times before, just from a different angle.
Right.
And I feel like there is a serious hunger for revenge. And then in a round of 16 game where, if I have this right, VAR doesn't come in until the quarters. Does that sound right to you?
It sounds right. Yeah. I'm not entirely sure.
I'm making that assumption and saying this with that assumption. I think that a home match against Houston without VAR in a single elimination cup contest is just the kind of nasty I want to see these guys show the fan base who they are, who they can be, who they want to be, and who they're capable of being in this competition, and sending them screaming into the quarterfinals at the beginning of July, hopefully with a favorable draw, hopefully another home match, not just because it's more interesting to cover a team in success, but in particular, Austin having a deep run into the final stages of this particular competition this year feels like a return to form, or finding the form that in 2022 was keyed as overperforming, that I think would help do something pretty important in terms of defining what this season, what this roster, what this sporting operation is now.
To remind you, in 2023, Austin did start their Open Cup run, beating a USL team in Q2, and then they got to host their round of 16 match against MLS side In this case, it was the Chicago Fire. That was the Leo Väisänen injury and Shaqiri figuring out how to play soccer for 90 minutes, where that had abandoned him for a lot of his time in Chicago, although not his time with the Swiss national team. Not a great experience for a lot of Boston fans. Hopefully this will go better, but they're in the round of 16, which is great. Only one MLS team lost. Sucks to be you, NYCFC. Pittsburgh Riverhounds, they get to do a cross-state rivalry match against the Union, which I think is going to be one of the more fun round of 16 open match games. Dallas goes against their traditional foes, the Red Bulls. Which it's a matchup of bulls, right? So you have the Dallas Toros and then you have the Red Bulls of energy drink.
Of Greater New Jersey.
Yes.
Looking ahead to the future, Phil, makes me think of the future, and who I think is a big part of the future of this club, Irvin Torres.
Yep.
Torres, short-term agreement.
Yep. So we're gonna probably see him. I don't know if we'll see him start, but I do figure that with the need for rotation, that is a clue that, again, it could be just break glass in case of an emergency, enjoy this trip to Cincinnati. You've done well in training, but I do suspect that he might get some minutes here. A tough debut MLS assignment. Hey, go guard Evander. one of the best players in the league, although not connecting as well with new striker Kevin Denke as we might have surmised that he would at the start of the year. Laurel Faller, really great FC Cincinnati writer. We did a 3 questions exchange. I answered some questions last night. She answered some questions today. So I'm going to get those up here. By the time you were hearing this on Saturday morning, it will definitely be up.
Laurel Faller, a wonderful journalist who is known by some as being wanted dead or alive by an MLS front office for doing her job responsibly.
Right. Yeah, that was a saga.
That was a saga, and something that I will always have an additional note of respect for her and for our colleagues who got her back when the one world government that is MLS tightened its grip a little bit too tight, if you ask me. But so Irvin Torres, I feel like he might get some minutes. I feel like the fun, ballsy thing would be starting him, which I don't think FCC would expect. It would help when it comes to depleted legs. It would help when it comes to coming back home for a home match, resting some of the guys who went real hard in that Open Cup game. And make no mistake, should they have won it? Should it have been easier on them? Sure. But in the actual play of it, that Open Cup game, that burned some rubber off of some tires. And I think Irvin Torres, as an experiment, as somebody who may be looking at the same supplemental roster spot situation that we got with Riley Thomas, I think that's more of an inevitability than an if. It's a when, not an if, when it comes to Irvin. And this stretch of May matches is probably where he's going to earn that. They're going to burn through those 4 short-term agreements, and then they're going to get him that supplemental slot. And he's more than earned it. He is solid. He hangs with the first-team guys. And I'll go ahead and plant a flag. I think that long-term and overall, he may end up working out better than Kevin Sullivan, the other wonder kid that is out there. Kevin Sullivan is very talented, but I feel like there is something smarter that is being done with the progression of Irvin Torres, where they are taking their time with him, and they have very different personal stories. But I think that when it comes to the long haul, there's a different kind of potential with an Irvin Torres that I think is going to sneak up and surprise a lot of people. And who knows, may surprise the pants off of a possibly heavily rotated FCC side that doesn't think that they are going to need to go that hard against this Austin roster at home. I think a lot of where my head's at about Saturday is Nico's already made his decisions about who he's starting and what cadence he's looking to do subs. A lot of it's going to come down to what team sheet FCC puts out there. What way is FCC looking at this match? And the best opportunity that Austin has for a win or a draw is if they are looking at resting some guys, because they've got a really stacked May calendar too.
The other player who might get some time and attention that you haven't seen a lot of this year would be CJ Fodry. I asked Nico about him the post-match press conference, and he did not get on the team sheet for El Paso through no fault of his own, no injury, nothing like that. It was just a 18-man rather than a 20-man roster that you get in MLS games. So Nico kind of assured everybody that CJ has been doing well. I don't know that we will necessarily see a start from him, but we might, because Vasquez and Azuni went a lot longer than they thought that they were going to have to go.
Mm-hmm.
I think they probably figured, oh, they're going to bang in some goals. We'll be in a lead. We'll pull them about minute 60. Obviously, did not happen. They needed them out there to score those goals late. I could also see a Podri starting again. Torres starting. I think we might know how that would go against a rested FCC side, but would be interesting to see them start. I wouldn't be entirely shocked if they started. I would be a little bit startled and surprised, but I do think that that is within the realm of possibility, just because, again, despite what Nico might be saying about, yes, we want to start our ideal 11 every match, I think they have to be realistic. And again, my hope is focus on Wednesdays for the month. Don't worry so much about the Saturdays. We will revisit those predictions that I had about how May goes. Well, I already missed on one because I thought that they would draw against Minnesota, and as it turns out, they lost that match, as we all know. So could go even worse than we expected. But again, there's also fluky MLS wins that shouldn't happen that actually do happen. So who knows? Maybe they go into Cincinnati with a rotated lineup and Matt Biazga gets a red card, and then all of a sudden we're off to the races and Austin win. Who knows? MLS.
I'm saying that's very much where my head's at, is that a lot of how Saturday will go is entirely up to chance at this point. And I think that let's talk about ideal 11 for a moment, because I've had a more measured version of this in my mind than I think a lot of folks think of. There is the A team and the B team. And I think that the definition of ideal 11 really does fluctuate for Nico, depending on who the opponent is, depending on who's depleted. Maybe Buka got the rest against El Paso because he's expected to start here. Svatok was, aside from Brad Stuver, one of two who did not sub in of the 7 who were on the bench against El Paso. I would fully expect Alexander Svatok to play the full 90 unless something goes awry and they rest Julio Cascante and have him on the bench. I would be surprised to see both CJ and Irvin start, but I wouldn't be worried about it. Because to me, what they need are fresh legs. What they need are people that FCC is not necessarily expecting to see coming, who they have not watched extensive amounts of tape on. And that describes CJ and Irvin really well.
I still do fully expect this to be a loss.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, to me, I would be delighted to be surprised by a win. I would even be delighted to be surprised by a draw. My expectations are like yours, fully set at this is going to be a loss against, and Nico didn't say this to get himself any excuses, but he's right. It is one of, if not the top side in MLS right now. They are very much up there with Miami and Vancouver. FCC is no slouch. Losing against FCC, congratulations. A lot of people have done that already this season.
I was going to say best American MLS team right now.
Yeah.
I have questions about how the rest of the month's going to go despite this match. My thing about this match is, can they not be embarrassed? Can they stay healthy? Can they get some meaningful minutes for some players who need some meaningful minutes? And from there, if they can scrap together some sort of result on fluky MLS luck, then so be it. That's fantastic. That's great. If they do not, then that's totally fine. If, again, though, it's another 5-1 endeavor, you can start getting some really ugly looking scores in that aggregate loss thing, looking at the last 3 losses and then the last 4 losses. That would be, again, we're already at 10-1 aggregate losses over the last 3 matches. And that is a little scary. And we thought on Wednesday night that we were going to add another 2-0 to that column heading into that 70-75 minute mark. But as Ilya was saying, again, with his sage calm, we needed 1 goal. And once they got the 1 goal, they knew that they were going to get the other goals that they needed to win the game, which remarkably happened. Obviously, that DC comeback with the legend of Pollo might be their best comeback story. This is not great that they dug themselves a hole against the USL Championship side, but they advance in Open Cup. If they do, put in the cart well before the horse here, but if they do end up winning Open Cup, we're all going to go back to that moment and think, oh boy, they almost blew this, and look, hey, a trophy.
Yeah. The Open Cup story is one that I think that could be real special, is having Ilya bring home his 3rd Open Cup and it be here, his first year here, right after winning it at LAFC.
Right.
I think there's more than just silver linings that one has to forcibly wring out of what could come. But as we've said before, May is going to determine a lot of that. Momentum is going to determine a lot of that. On paper, that 10-1 stat that you just mentioned, whatever, what really matters is wins. But that 10-1, that does something to the player's mentality. Until they get out from under stuff like that, they don't reputationally want to feel that they let that much in and score that little. Right. They want to tip that balance starkly the other direction. And doing it, if they are able to pull off, coming off of the momentum of that Open Cup win, something very unlikely, and beat FCC, and then come home to play completely on the other side of the Eastern Conference, Atlanta, and then head from that into their next game against Vancouver at home, that makes me think differently about just how unlikely what I also think is unlikely, which is that they beat Vancouver at home or even draw Vancouver at home. Right. It changes my calculus of maybe they can. Maybe they can. At this point, I do not see it happening, and they've got to convince me otherwise. But before they got to convince me, they got to convince themselves.
They only gave up 3 goals in that first 7 games total. And then we've seen this relative slide over the last 4 games. So again, I'm still trying to figure out like what specifically is happening defensively, because they did seem like they were a lot better in their own defensive third in particular, that they were closing things down, they were clearing, they were intercepting, they were playing really tight defense. And you look at some of these goals in the last 3 losses that they've had, and then you look at the goals that El Paso scored in this game, and those were terrific defensive efforts at all. There were some very decided individual mistakes on some of those plays that have happened. This game, you had Julio with what you could say is some pretty lax defense on the first goal, and then Heinzike on the second goal looks like he is trying to head the ball out and then just heads it a little bit further closer to goal, essentially assisting Avila on his second goal. Not great moments from the defense. We've seen them capable of good things this year, but are we going to see them capable of those good things again? And is this just a 4-match or 3 out of 4 match aberration? Because they did shut out the Galaxy again. The Galaxy just lost a game without having their other team that they were playing against take a shot. Technically, there's that. I mean, it could be worse. You could be rooting for the Galaxy right now. You could have this new star on your crest, the 6th title, and that can seem like 5 or 6 years ago right now. I cannot imagine what that is like to have seen your team win an MLS Cup in December and then to see this utter collapse 5 months later.
Of all times for this club to go on an improbable, unlikely, some would say statistically impossible heater during a hell month for everybody, this is the year, this is the month that if they can, honestly, some of these definitely draws are as good as wins when it comes to re-earning trust from the fan base and people filling those seats back in and giving them their Wednesday nights, giving them their Saturday evenings, whether home or away. That's what they've got to do, is do that thing that Nico, I'm being charitable, saying imperfectly referred to as showing that they would not die, that they could hit adversity, but it would not kill them, that it would not see them just crumble. That is the big difference between that Houston away match and their next match, is they did make that progress, and they've got to do that every time. And that's what is going to help them survive the month of May. At this point, yeah, it really is a steep hill.
So if you are not wanting to watch this FC Cincinnati game alone, as you may not, after you read the 3 questions exchange that I do, and after listening to this podcast and hearing about the sheer improbability of Austin winning, though not impossible as we have laid out here, what might you want to do? There's not a watch party this week per se, but
LV has partnered with a number of different places to make sure that pub club wise, you've got various places around town, in different parts of town too, where you can go to watch the match, where you know that they will have the match on with sound and captions on, crucially. So the current LV full 90 club locations include the Brutorium Brewery and Kitchen,
Mhm.
Great brews and fantastic food
Of
right
the
off the
pretzels.
top. The pretzels are so good. Hop Squad Brewing Company, as always, very much LV's headquarters on game day, home or away. In fact, that's where a lot of us watched those second team games when they won that championship in 2023.
Yep.
Both Luster Pearl East and Luster Pearl South, great folks that we've partnered with both in Austin and outside of Austin, actually.
Right.
Meanwhile Brewing, the site of Verde Fest for a couple of years running, and then Mags out in Cedar Park. So folks out in Cedar Park who are constantly like, oh man, I got to drive all the way into Hop Squad. I got to drive all the way into this place. You can go to Mags, and there will be Cedar Park area Verdes who are out there wanting to watch with you. And
Nice.
the list is expected to grow. Addresses and everything for participating locations are on the events page of the Los Verdes website, losverdesatx.org. And keep an eye out for more of them popping up. And if maybe, I don't know, maybe you live out in the Drip. Maybe you're out in Dripping Springs and you've got a place that you know will put the match on. Get in touch with your friends over at Los Verdes and see about captaining, getting yet another location set up and running. Because the more places there are for people to go out and watch the match, the better.
Yeah, and if you haven't been out to Meanwhile yet, you can get yourself south. It's a great place. Really good beers. They have food trucks. They even have a soccer field. They have a playground. My daughter loves it. So we actually ended up spending Easter there after we couldn't get into Mass. The cathedral was full. They didn't have overflow rooms. We got there a little bit late. And so my wife and daughter tried to get in, and then they said, well, come pick us up. They're not letting us into church, which is a weird thing to say about a church. But so be it. Of course, I was still circling around downtown trying to park. Yeah, we skipped Mass and ended up getting beer and food. So that's
skip Mass, see a
Yeah.
match. LV Full 90 Club.
ta-da. All right. So anything else that we need to touch on?
Between now and when we record next, there's an Austin FC 2 away match against Ventura County FC, otherwise known as Galaxy 2, next Tuesday the 13th. 9 p.m. start time. I'm not sure about the other full 90 locations, but I gather Hop Squad will probably put it on just for folks to have a place to go if you're not going to just hang out at home and watch it on Season Pass. We'll get confirmation of that, but I gather from previous experience, I'll just text Cesar and be like, hey, there's a weird second team match on a Tuesday. And he's like, will 10 people come and buy beer? And I'll say, yeah. And he's like, yeah, what else are we going to put on? March Madness is over.
Right. And it's a watch party.
Yeah.
An unofficial watch party, but a watch party nonetheless. Yeah.
Sometimes a wild watch party just springs up out of nowhere.
Right. Okay. Next week, of course, we haven't even really previewed Atlanta yet. that's gonna sneak up on us between now and then. This keeps happening. Do we want to say anything really quick about Atlanta? They have been struggling. I imagine I am going to reach out to Sam Jones, and by the time you are hearing this show next week, we will break that match down and we'll see if Sam's insights, if we can get him with us here, come to fruition. They're having a tough season. They, like Austin, got a lot of really talented players in the off season, and it hasn't quite transpired in the way that they thought it would. There are concerns about the coach who just got there. So if a lot of this is sounding really familiar to you, yep.
Welcome to MLS, guys. Right. I'm planting my flag. I've mentioned this in the past. You ran down everything else pretty important. They traded Tyler Wolff to RSL, so they're without a Wolff. And I am fully convinced that Atlanta United is where Josh Wolf's going to end up eventually.
Right.
If not before the end of this season. I feel like that's where Josh Wolff is going to end up landing, because that fan base is not happy with how things are right now. And they may not be happy with the idea of Josh Wolff, but if it is a Josh Wolff buoyed with looking like an effective part of a Ben Olsen coaching situation at Houston Dynamo, maybe they are more interested in welcoming their hometown boy back. Right. Who knows?
They may snap up Curtin or Vanni Sartini, who are currently both out of work, and you could probably make more compelling arguments for a fan base to take one of those coaches on. Yeah, but I do hear the Josh Atlanta connections, hometown hero returns home kind of vibe. That might be, we'll have to see if that transpires. You did remind me though. Yeah. So Tyler is at RSL. So we're going to get a Wolf versus Wolf match here before the end of the month as well.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. I approach that kind of thing from a bit more of, I guess, a having fun kind of thing, where at one point there was that possibility that there would have been the 3 Wolf lineup, the full Wolf pack forward midfield defender situation that I would have found wildly entertaining had reality taken a very different path. It'll be interesting to see Tyler V. Owen, Dawn of Wolf Justice, or whatever you want to call it.
That is like the worst thing I've ever heard in the history of the 7 years that I've been on this planet.